Welcome to the Mood Board. We're back for episode 14. I'm Aaron.
And this is Caesar.
And this is the Mood Board podcast where we have meaningful conversations to help you unlock your creative potential. And this episode, we're going to talk about a few things that have been on our minds lately, and we hope you enjoy it. So maybe we can start by catching up on what happened in the last episode and what's been going on for the past week for you, Caesar.
Yeah, so to briefly recap, we were touching on how going to old places or revisiting history can spark new ideas. Revisiting an old approach or like an old outcome can help us kickstart something new. And it was a great topic because that week I had watched again Objectified, the documentary, and how even though this was filmed back in 2009, it is still relevant. It is still we're still having the same challenges. And I love how that quote-unquote old documentary made me look at it now through a different lens. And I think this is something you could watch every year and you're going to get something new out of it.
Yeah, I would imagine that all of your experience having gone through that manufacturing process and entertaining those questions that maybe as a student you had not too much experience with at a larger scale, these questions are a lot more complex, perhaps. And yeah, I'm curious to see how the film evolves with us and for the people who design and decide to watch this. Because
Totally.
they are questions.
Yes, timeless questions, timeless issues. And I think it would be great to, now that I know a little bit more about fashion and what goes behind it, I will be interested in what if you made this documentary film, but specific to your field. I think there could be a lot of more uncharted territory or like things that you could address if you made it specific to your field. Because I felt like, yes, in Objectified, they tried to cover as much as they could to make it relevant for everyone and appealing for everyone. But yeah, I would be interested in doing one, like for me, just for fashion.
Yeah. I think that part of the documentary of just being able to see the perspectives of people who design cars, people who design furniture, to people who design computer electronics, it gives us that wide breadth of points of views. And it would be cool to just have Objectified break out into different, like Objectified fashion, have sequels to that documentary. Maybe you could pitch that to the director.
I know, that would be pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. I recently went to, speaking of like old things and how we can draw inspiration from that, I recently visited the New York City Transit Museum. And in this museum, you get a glimpse of what the process was like to create the transit system, the metro system here in New York City. And I saw a few quotes that really inspired me. And one of them was just to give you a little bit of context, they started building the New York City transit system in 1902, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow.
And that was like when they first started digging. And at this time, like throughout the following years and decades, New York City was starting to create skyscrapers and tall buildings and things like that. And this quote I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was more along the lines of the city's energy was so intent and attractive for people from all over the world, because New York City was building these incredible buildings and the world was watching. And so they were in the process of creating this transit system. They were just doing things that were just like superhuman,
Right.
and cutting through rock 200 feet into the
That's
ground
crazy.
it was a
That's
dangerous
crazy.
task. And I don't know, it just
Yeah.
got me thinking about like how these people from back then who didn't have computers, who didn't have technology the way we have it today, were so ambitious, and they were just like going at it, just like through brute force and ingenuity. And I don't know, it just got me really inspired, because today we are faced with a lot of technical challenges. And like you mentioned, this Objectified touches on these topics, and we can always draw inspiration from the past, I think.
Totally. And since you mentioned, the construction, like the way New York City was made and what it took to create such a big city, it reminds me of two things about the mentality like before. And I think to a certain extent that it still remains today, but I think it reminds me of how they made the Hoover Dam in Las Vegas. It's like one of those like marvelous constructions built at that time. Because I don't know, they were talking about how much concrete they pour to make that dam.
Wow.
And I don't know, it was like something like astronomical, like never seen before. And it was so big that they had to build the concrete factory on site so that they could create the
Wow.
concrete to make the construction. And it was the scale of that construction, it was that big that you have to do that. And I wish there was a little bit of that, at least for me in the footwear industry, where if people are gonna create something here, instead of okay, we'll just go overseas and figure out how to make it there. No, why don't you figure out how to make it here? And an example of that, I think a company that's been pretty good at having made in USA initiatives is Walmart. And
Really?
yeah, Walmart has a lot of investment in made in USA, which is great, and I think it makes sense. And I believe if you sell a product here, you should make it here. And I don't know if you saw a lot on the news. There was the buzz about the on-running shoe that was made on a robot, and it
Yeah.
sprays the upper. Those kind of things are entertaining, but what would be like really like what would go beyond and truly like innovative would be like, okay, you made that innovation, now made it accessible for everyone. You could have started exploring like, okay, how can I take that setup to put it like on either on a store. I know there is like other things in other issues when it comes to like you selling where you manufacture, like that's not impossible, but it's very hard. But it would be really cool, hypothetically, a blue sky type of approach. But let's say if you could put that setup in, let's say, on a truck, and you could sell shoes and make shoes wherever you go, that type of thing. Or if you can put that setup in a store and people can get their shoe made right there and then. But yeah, just thinking about ways of making that shoe accessible to everyone at a cost-effective price as well. Because that shoe, I bet you, is like $250 or something like that.
Yeah.
Or it's, we have this innovation, it comes at a price.
Right.
But the challenging thing is that they go through all this process of creating something new, but at the end of the day, the shoe looks like something that shoe looks like a shoe, like something that's been done before. There hasn't been a visual advancement. And I don't know how you feel about when companies or brands market new product, but it looks like something, it looked like something that already exists.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, you're selling me on a new process, but like the result is the same.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you see value in that, or what are your feelings?
I think it's always interesting whenever a company present a product that, like you mentioned, has already exists, but they come up with some sort of new angle or spin on it. And I think it interests me more for its angle and the way people respond to it if it's like very popular, for example. But when it comes to things for the human body, like the human body is consistent, like it's not, if like you mentioned, shoes are,
Changing.
yeah, there are different ways to apply a fresh visual take on it, but the form remains the same. And I think I don't know, I feel conflicted with things that are manufactured in a certain way that is very Instagrammable, shareable, It reminds me a lot about the as seen on TV commercials from back in the day. In the US, there's these commercials that they used to have these as seen on TV labels on it because they would create this whole promo around the product, and you'd find these products at the store, and they usually were gimmicky or they had some kind of like angle, right?
Right on.
So I think the products that are able to make something that was previously really expensive but now is like super accessible in a digital product. Let's take, for example, chauffeur cars, black car service with Uber, right? That gets really interesting. And in physical products, maybe like the Yeezy Pods, right? The thought of $20 shoes is what? That's bonkers. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah. I think it would also be like, let's look at the iPhone, for example. The iPhone, when it came out, yes, it wasn't the cheapest choice, and it was really expensive, and AT&T was the only carrier willing to gamble with new technology, new phone, whatever. And it wasn't the cheapest, but look what it looked like. It didn't have buttons. So I'm like, okay, yes, that justifies the price. That justifies the effort that I have to make to purchase something that, like, you're selling me something truly new. So I think that's a great example of at least footwear companies should follow. Sure, you're selling me something new, but it looks like a regular shoe. So
yeah,
I'm not gaining anything. And another example would be like the Adidas for the 3D printed midsole. Do you know that?
It's like
that shoe started. Yeah. No, it was the midsole with the squiggles.
Oh, okay. I think I know what you're talking.
Yeah, I think it's Adidas 4D. But yeah, that shoe, when it came out, it was like, I don't know, $500 or something like that. And now you see that shoe on sale for, I don't know, 120, 150.
Yeah.
Like they had to bring it down because it's just not. Yes, you are selling or like innovating in an aspect of the product, but the product looks the same and like you're charging more. So consumers, I think that's also something we should talk about, like how consumer behavior, consumer perception has evolved. And like consumers now are, I believe, smarter.
Yeah.
Because now like you have the internet, you do research. Before it was different.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, you sell it, you put it on TV, everyone just eats it. But I think now people are a little bit more cautious. Also, like finances aren't in the greatest shape, so people are like, okay, let me look into it. Let me do some research.
Yeah, I think going back to the topic of the iPhone and the way new things are usually very pricey. If you recall, Apple, the angle was that it eliminated the need for two devices. It combined your iPod and your phone. And so that justified the price of it. That's how
That's a
they,
good point.
yeah, and they were like, it's
Oh,
the
I didn't
best.
know.
Yeah, it was like, it's the best phone that ever existed, and it's also the best iPod that's ever existed. So that's why it's this price.
How
So
much was the iPod at that time?
the iPod itself, you could get
$200?
maybe $299 for like a 40, I don't know, like a 20 gigabyte iPod, or no, it was probably more, it was like 120. I don't remember the exact storage sizes, but yeah, it was like $300, and then a phone, regular BlackBerry, maybe would be another 5 or 300, or I don't know, something like that. But that's how they justified the initial price. Another thing too is like Tesla, for example, is a company that approaches creating the very expensive product first with the Tesla Roadster, with so bringing that to the very top market, and then using the profit from that to create more accessible products. So that strategy is a strategy that's like pretty good, to bring the most, get into the niche market and then expand from that. But I do see your point, and about creating products that are like more accessible to a larger audience, and like accepting the technical constraints of that, and bringing manufacturing to where you're producing, where you're assembling, and where you're selling. It reminds me of something. I just watched this documentary on, it's called Omnivore, and it's on Apple TV. And one of the chefs that they interview, the topic is on tuna, right? So tuna used to be not very popular, but then, oh, this is such a great story. I have to tell it really quickly. In Japan, they had all these airplanes that basically were traveling around the world, and they were coming back empty. And so they tried to figure out a way to utilize that empty space to transport things. And so some guy figured out that they could transport tuna if they could have a stable temperature. So they invented all this technology to transport tuna right after it's been caught and sold. That basically led to an increase of demand in tuna around the world. And one of the chefs, so you got that context, and now one of the chefs says he's from Spain, and he like works with the local fishmongers who supply his tuna. And he said that if tuna wasn't available in his region, he wouldn't cook it, he wouldn't buy it, because
oh wow,
you're like creating a disbalance with sourcing from afar and using that ingredient. So it just reminded me about what you said, is if you're producing a shoe, or if you're producing something here, find out how to make the entire process here in the place that you're in.
Yeah, and not only that, think about the economic impact you could create by
truly
by having something made locally, sold locally, sourced locally. You create this like such a solid, or you create, of course you have to, I think this is where the conversation about reimagining and reimagining how we live comes into play, and how the way cities have been set up now are very challenging to implement this model. So that's why we should every time we have a chance to create a new community, a new neighborhood, we should truly rethink how that is done, because that could facilitate or yields for new habits, new ways of interacting with your environment. And I think that creates new cultures, because just imagine how different we would be if our cities were set up or built differently.
Truly. Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of them are car dependent.
Right. And there's been an attempt to that, I believe, in Las Vegas. I'm not sure where, but I believe there was an attempt to create this community where you could get anywhere you need to be by walking 15, and it only takes 15 minutes. You could get to anywhere, but it only takes you 15 minutes. And I believe there is like a school, hospital access, all these things within walking distance.
Man, we talked about this in one of our earlier episodes, the idea of where you source your ingredients, where you source inspiration. I think we were talking about it from the inspiration angle. But if you think about
Mm-hmm.
it from just the source, the producer, and the consumer, I've been very mindful in the last couple years of just like where I get my groceries. Like, can I try to find, can I get this from a farmer somewhere at a farmer's market,
Mm.
versus a grocery? Because I started to think like all the individual people and processes that are involved, like getting food from the ground or from a tree or from wherever it's sourced to your table, and shortening that, or shortening the amount of players in between, like in that process, makes a big difference in terms of flavor and just quality, etc. But I find that this pattern applies to so many things, whether you're getting inspiration, are you the only person that taking this picture and it's just that's your piece of inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
and also just like materials and like community. Does designing a city just sounds like such a cool thing to do, and deciding, hey, we're going to make this town designed for walking and not necessarily for cars. I just
Mm-hmm.
went off a tangent there, but the idea of how much your environment influences your behaviors, your choices, your purchasing choices, right? If there is a grocery store that is much more conveniently located to you, but they don't sell the highest quality products, most more likely than not, you're going to probably, choose convenience. And because that's how we are as human beings, for the most part, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Yeah. And think about the farm to table initiatives. How much better the food is, how just everything is easier because you have access to the convenience of, oh, you need something or to get the best or like the most nutritious way of eating. And I don't know, it doesn't fit my mind like when, let's say, when they bring food from so far away. Um
Yeah.
I just don't know like how sustainable that is just from the standpoint of the food. Like how does it maintain its freshness and then by the time it gets here, by the time someone buys it, I would rather just not have it.
Episode where we talk about just the complexity of shipping food around the world. Like there's so much technology that had to be invented for that to happen, and design that is like service design, all these different facets of design that are happening in order to make that
Mm-hmm.
happen. And there's, I also just feel like, man, the quality of the ingredient, like, and also the knowledge of knowing that you bought it from a place that's like an hour away. I was talking with a friend recently who grew up on a farm, and he was just saying that if you went to the butcher shop in his town, like chances are
Mm.
whatever, piece of meat you're looking at,
Mm.
the butcher probably knows what farm and what pig it was, or what animal it was, what livestock. And I think what we are challenged with now in modern times is
Mm-hmm.
maintaining that connection with our like our natural resources, and knowing that they're not unlimited
Mm. Right.
and that they're
Yeah.
fragile. And I think there's a lot of people who are unaware of where things come from, and because they don't, maybe they've never thought about it. But would you ever be a farmer? Would you ever want to grow your own food and your own animal and stuff?
I don't think so.
No, it just sounds like a lot of work,
No.
right?
a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work, and you have to know what you're doing as well.
True.
I don't know if I'm willing to go through the learning curve,
Yeah.
but I will be willing to facilitate a lot. I don't know, transportation or something like getting it to a certain place or something, or coming out with a system. Talking about a system, I came across, I think it was last year, in Japan, how vending machines are so advanced there. Vending machines, there is a vending machine that that grows its own lettuce, and you can buy it.
Whoa. Greenhouse
So
vending
like
machine.
they pretty much, yeah, it's this huge vending machine, but like you see the lettuce growing there, and I think it like the output is pretty like decent. It's 60, I don't know, like 60 heads of lettuce you can grow
Wow.
there, or and
That's
yeah, it's
interesting.
growth there in the vending machine, and people come buy it. And I don't know details of how it's replaced, how it's kept up, or how it's done. When you think about that kind of accessibility, and that's what I wish footwear companies would do. We're like, yes, you came out with this great innovation, great process, but it's something that people benefit from. I'm sure these things are being made overseas, so it's just sure it's a sustainable attempt, but is it a sustainable result?
Yeah. That's really interesting that they have these vending machines.
Do you think Japan is already like a lot of vending machines everywhere, anywhere? Do you think that catching a little bit more of traction here in the US, or like US market for US products?
I wonder. I don't know. Just thinking about New York City
Mm.
and where, like, where is a good location for something experimental? I guess it would be experimental for the US, but not sure. I think I would be curious to see that being like a tested somewhere, just to
Mm.
learn what the differences in culture, if there are any, like, what's the thought process behind people who are wanting to buy, let's say, produce from a vending machine? Is that going to break their mental model of what a vending machine is supposed to offer? Because most likely it
Mm-hmm.
will, because typically you only are afforded candy or processed sugars in a vending machine, or bottled
Mm-hmm.
water, or plushy toys, or I don't know, electronics
Yeah.
now. So I'm curious to see where these machines would be placed. What environments would they be placed in? Because they can't be placed in like maybe they could in a grocery store.
There is this thing called farmer's fridge, and is fresh convenient meal. Uh, and I experienced it using this vending machine when I was in Chicago for about a month. The place where the building where I was working at, it was like an industrial building, old
Mm-hmm.
building. They had this farmer's fridge vending machine,
Interesting.
and for me to go to eat something, I had to like, it was like a mission. It was something else that I had to think about, do unless I order. For me, that farmer's fridge was my go-to, because they will have boiled eggs, they will have salads. It was like cold food, but they will have salads, chicken, like a protein jar. And it was a great alternative. It was a great thing to have. Because as you
Okay.
said, yeah, vending machines are usually reserved for the snacks, the sweets, the sugars,
Yeah.
processed food. And then you have the drinks, which is like water is the healthiest things you can get there. But this farmer's fridge was very good because you have healthy choices. And I really liked it because instead of me eating a pack of chips, I was eating a boiled egg or a protein ball or something like that. So I really enjoy having that to my availability.
Yeah, like offering these healthy alternatives if in the vending machine, I think would be really good to have for like small towns, because that's one other thing that I've noticed, that there's these like food deserts in some areas
I've heard about that.
where the only thing that you have access to is this one grocery store, which is usually a huge supermarket like Walmart. And I visited a few of these places and they don't, and it's probably, I don't know why it is, but it's probably there's not enough demand for it, or there's just lack of education around it. But
that could be a
I'm
challenge. Just not enough demand to justify the cost.
Yeah, exactly.
So we would love to hear our audience thoughts in regards of brands marketing to you innovative products, new products, but they look like things that they already exist. So I want to hear, we would love to hear your thoughts about what would you like to see when brands or companies market or create new products. What would you like to see? What is a new product to you? What is your perception of something refreshing?
It's a good question.
I think that's something we can we can explore this on future episodes. But yeah, we would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and we really appreciate everyone's thoughts on LinkedIn to the question that Cesar presented about whether non-AI is the new non-GMO. We got a few responses, that very thoughtful replies, and I'm curious to continue that conversation as well and see what we can learn. Maybe in the next episode, we can dive deeper into that. We are already getting organized with our first guest, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Mood Board. I'm Aaron.
And this is Cesar.
And this is The Mood Board, where we have meaningful conversation to help you unlock your creative potential. Until next time.